Welcome to Face2Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face2Face.
So my next interview is with Dr. Mazen Kamen. He is the founder of the Kamen Brain Tumor Foundation, and we have a conversation about science and about scratching the tip of the iceberg, but really why we end up into that conversation. He's a cardiologist, by the way, and it's kind of interesting because he tells us why cardiology is kind of easy. As a doctor, that's easy science. It's easy to fix somebody's heart. It's a little more challenging when we're talking about something like brain cancer. And Dr. Kamen tragically lost his 19-month-old son to brain cancer many years ago, and so he has now dedicated his life to obviously to cardiology and to health as a sort of a overarching kind of umbrella. But he's really specifically focused on improving treatment and survival of children with a very specific kind of brain tumor. And it's the kind of thing that comes out of these, it seems to me, these moments in our lives that these historic moments in our lives that create opportunities for us to do things that we wouldn't have probably done before. And so we talk about the disease, we talk about his history and so on, and his experience of that. But really, what we get into is in my opinion anyway, is the hopeful side of this. And we talk about some of the, I'm going to use the word crazy. I hope that's okay. Dr. Kamen, but yeah, really groundbreaking and remarkable science that's going on, and the gift of this applied science that's happening in the laboratory and in the hospital. So stay tuned for a very hopeful conversation with Dr. Kamen coming right up. And don't forget that davidpecklive.com, you can find more information out there about my writing and my public speaking. You can get a copy of Real Change is Incremental there. And also face2facelive.ca, we are coming up on 500 interviews. I would really appreciate it if you signed up for our newsletter, if you forwarded it to someone else. You can also support the work we do through Patreon, patreon.com, monthly. And that would be really appreciated. And if you can't do that, and I totally get if you can't, you could always leave us a review, and we would really appreciate that on iTunes. The more digital noise out there, positive noise that is, about the podcast and so on, the better off we're going to be. So please do that if you can. And then if you'd like to advertise with Face2Face, we have newsletters. We have a really big reach, significant digital reach into the global community, about 20 countries. We've got newsletters, banners, website advertising, shout-outs during. Reach out to us if you're interested. And also, don't forget, Face also appears on rabble.ca. That is a platform where you can find a whole host of other podcasters and bloggers and thinkers and journalists talking about, as they say, news for the rest of us. News that matters, in truth. So check that out there. And don't touch the dial. Coming right up, an interview with the founder of the Kamen Brain Tumor Foundation, Dr. Mazen Kamen. Well, welcome to Face2Face. We're joined by a very special guest here with us today. We have Dr. Mazen Kamen here with us. He is the president of the Kamen Brain Tumor Foundation. We are going to talk about some pretty scientific things, I would imagine, but also some things really rooted in just the everyday business of being a mom and being a dad and being I hope, a better human being. So, Dr. Kamen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're on a first name basis now, aren't we, Mazen? Is that okay?
Yeah,
okay, excellent,
perfect.
Excellent. So we got that whole doctor thing out of the way. That's perfect. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about the history of the foundation, and we were just before we hit the record button, which is always kind of interesting. Sometimes it's funny when I do these interviews, and I'm coming up on 500 of these, believe it or not, published interviews.
Good for you.
There's I feel I feel like I should have hit the record button a lot sooner, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because you sort of sometimes you miss some of those gems along the way. Anyway, give us a little bit of history, if you will, about you and your research and the work that you do and the foundation itself.
So the foundation, the Kamen Brain Tumor Foundation, was established, David, about 4 years ago after the unfortunate death of my son Lance at age 19 from a brain tumor. He was diagnosed at age 13, and he was a very healthy young man, no problem, loves life, has aspirations and dreams like any one of us. And all of a sudden started having headaches, and to make a long story short, came up with a diagnosis of a brain tumor. We went through a long and a tedious trip of 6 years that included multiple craniotomies and chemotherapy, radiation, immune therapy. And then he succumbed to his illness 6 years later. And then, you know, needless to say, the grieving process is very hard, and you go through phases. It shatters, emotions. It affects your faith in God, but luckily we came together and we decided that to make something good out of this pretty bad experience. And one thing we thought about after seeing a lot of patients, a lot of kids with this diagnosis, and how it affected not only those children but also those families, that we can maybe help do something to alleviate that. So we came with the idea of establishing a foundation that funds cutting edge research to find better and safer treatment options for pediatric brain cancer. See, the problem, David, here is if you go 25, 30 years ago, the average survival of a patient with a brain tumor was 15 months. Well, remarkably and unfortunately, this has not changed. And we're talking 30 years ago. So obviously, the therapy, despite new drugs, no chemotherapy, new modalities of radiation, has not worked. And I'm sure we all know about Senator McCain and Senator Kennedy and a lot of people who have been diagnosed, and Bo Biden, with brain tumors, and they succumb to that illness. It's really almost a death sentence. And we collected an advisory board, medical council board, that from top-notch researchers across the country, that we focused and we tried to focus on, to think a little bit outside the box, and what are we doing wrong, or what can we do different that
Right.
maybe makes a difference in that, and to change the needle a little bit here in terms of survival. So we have been looking all throughout this country about new modalities of research, and we fund three primary research programs in New York and one in Boston at Dana-Farber that we think have a lot of promise and potential to make a real difference.
So was this something you were entirely thrown into, Mason, as a result of your son's death?
Yes, I'm a cardiologist by trade.
Hmm,
I don't know any. I did not know anything about brain tumors.
right.
Unfortunately, I know a lot about it now. But that's okay. If we can make a difference in the life of a child, I think the world will be a much better place. So yes, I was thrown into this.
And do you think, I mean, is that how, in some cases, sadly, I think, as you already sort of pointed out, how research is driven forward? I mean, to some degree, science is, I suppose, rooted in level of interest. This idea of curiosity and wonder.
Yeah.
Got to find out how the universe works. So, boy, I better get some research money to help me do that. PhDs and so on. We could talk about that type of academic work moving forward. But in this case, it's almost it certainly wasn't intentional on your part, and yet imagine as you said, in 25 to 30 years, things just haven't changed. Here you are now on the edge of helping to move that needle, but not by design,
Correct.
right? Like,
Correct. Correct.
is that kind
It's
of
not,
how
it's
the
really,
world of science works to some degree?
yeah, it really is.
Sadly.
Sadly, it is. And it takes sometimes a very deep personal experience.
Mm,
I don't want to say to wake up the conscious, but to really shake somebody so hard to infuriate them to make they want to make something, to want to do something. But isn't it usually the case with most foundations? I think it is. Most of them have some personal experience that they've been through, and they try to create something out of it. That's something that's good.
yeah, it's got to be the hope. And listen, I am so sorry about your son. And I'm a dad. I've got a daughter of 11 and a son of 14. And one day they'll probably listen to some of my podcasts and be annoyed that I talked about them so much. But it's got to be so difficult, and yet on some levels, I would think also quite rewarding that you're, in a sense, able to roll your sleeves up like this and step into it. Tell me a little bit more about how it practically plays out. So you're raising funds, you're
Well,
getting behind certain, I would imagine, certain doctors, certain laboratories, certain hospitals, that kind of a
yes,
thing.
yes, we are very committed to raise substantial funding for those research programs. Now, I will, if I may, I will tell you about a few of them that we are doing. We are
Hmm.
helping to fund, and one of them is really a very innovative and a pioneering research program that's being conducted at Cornell Medical Center, Weill Cornell Medical Center in New York City by Dr. Howard Fine. And Dr. Fine was at the Dana-Farber Institute in Boston and then moved to National Institute of Health before moving to New York University Medical Center and thereafter to Cornell, where he is directing the Brain Cancer Center. And what he is doing, and he's a remarkable fellow in the sense that he recognizes that the traditional chemotherapy slash radiation therapy to treat brain cancer is not working. So what he's doing, he's embarked on a pioneering research that's called organoids. And a short, sentence, what it is, it's really growing the actual brain tumor cells from the actual patient and harvesting them during surgery and growing them in the laboratory. So basically, we're growing tumors, brain tumors, in the laboratory as if they're growing in the patient themselves, and then attacking them or treating them with a lot of modalities of therapy and seeing which works, which doesn't. And if whatever, when we find which is the one that works, then we'll go ahead and implement it on the patient rather than the trial and error approach that we've been doing in the past. And the trial and error approach that we've been doing is really caused a lot of deaths, not only from the tumor itself, but from the toxicities
Mm.
from those drugs. So we're avoiding that right now by focusing only on what works and what's not working. See, each brain tumor is very different. Each patient brain is very different,
Mm.
and they demand their different mutations, their different genes, and they demand different drugs. So, without the ability to identify which drug is more specific to each patient, there's no way that we can treat the tumors effectively.
So Mason, does that mean that for each specific context, so each specific brain, Dr. Fine takes out cells,
Right.
you treat them in the petri dish, as it were,
Correct.
develop hopefully some kind of a treatment, and then that gets applied to this specific patient. Obviously, lessons would be learned that could be applied to others, I would imagine. But the idea going forward would be that the organoids, right?
Correct.
Organoids would be created per patient. Is
Correct.
that
Correct.
wow? It's, it's so funny. I love science like that. You explain it to me and I go, yeah, I mean, come on, what's so hard about that? I mean, that just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's really an amazing technology. And actually, Dr. Fine's laboratory just acquired a multi-million dollar robotic engineering system. One of a kind, David. There's really nothing like it in the whole world. This is the only place, Cornell, that has it. And basically, what that robot does, it institutes multiple medications on hundreds of petri dishes at the same time,
Mm.
expediting the results, meaning trying to find out in a very efficient way which works, which doesn't, rather than having manual, people doing it themselves and taking such a long time. So that's a wonderful thing.
Mazen, is this primarily a pediatric disease? Is this children? Is this teenagers? Does this cross over into adults as well?
Actually, unfortunately, it affects brain cancer. Is See, the thing is about brain cancer is rare. It's not that common as breast cancer, as prostate cancer, lung cancer. It's about overall in the United States 6 per 100,000 people, 6 cases per 100,000 people, more so in males than females. But the unfortunate thing is, like, it's about 30,000 kids are living with a brain tumor in the United States right
Hmm.
now. And 4,000 new cases are expected to be diagnosed this year. Now, adult brain cancer is, brain cancer, we don't know the etiology of it, David, as you know, but we think that it has a lot to do, partly maybe with the environment, maybe with genes, and maybe with spontaneous mutations. But yes, it crosses the racial, the socioeconomic divide, and it affects both pediatrics and the adolescents and adults in a very devastating manner.
Is there a policy like ask for your foundation, or are you primarily, your laboratory focus, your scientific focus, your research, as you said earlier, research focus? But I'm just wondering from black tie affairs, cocktail parties, receptions, things happening over lunches. Is there a sense of having, you mentioned a couple politicians earlier
Right.
too,
Right.
suffering. Is there a political ask here? Is there
Yeah,
an opportunity to change, I don't know, legislation towards funding for this type
absolutely.
of
I
research?
I think that's such an important thing you hit on, David. You see, brain cancer, defeating brain cancer is a very daunting task. It
Hmm.
cannot be done by the public sector by itself or the private sector, or I think government. I think you need the collaboration of
Right.
all three sectors because it requires manpower, it requires finance, and it requires dedication and commitment. And we have been in contact with the Biden Moonshot Project. As you know, Vice President Biden with his son Beau Biden that passed from brain cancer, and they're doing a wonderful job with that.
Hmm.
And I think if we can collaborate, a lot of people who are working uh, on the same objective to work together, I think that would be wonderful. And yes, funding is so important because let's face it, that's really how good quality research is done, because you have to pay quality researchers and you have to get the quality technology to perform it.
So you've been a doctor a long time. I mean, you've seen. I would imagine most doctors could write, pretty fascinating autobiographies, or have fascinating biographies written about them. The stories, operating table, the GPs, the
Yeah,
emergency rooms, and so on.
yeah.
Are are you? I mean, anything standing out to you? I mean, obviously, the organoid like
Yes, yes,
research
yes.
is pretty sophisticated and fascinating. On one hand, sounds so simple and makes so much sense, and then obviously on another, it's quite groundbreaking. But yeah, just wondering about that, and also just your the public engagement attached to that. Are
Uh,
people paying attention?
They are.
There's a couple of questions there, Mason,
Yeah.
but would love to hear more about that.
They are. I think the public is getting more aware about brain cancer, and unfortunately and sadly, it's because a lot of people, and some of them are celebrities, and some of them are not,
Mm,
are dying from this disease, and because our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do other than offer them the traditional therapy that we've been using for years and years, and it's not working. So there's a lot of frustration that we need to do something. Another research that's going on, David, by also at New York Presbyterian Hospital by Dr. Mark Sweden and his remarkable team. He's the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Cornell, New York Presbyterian. And what he's doing is he is not taking some of these tumors out from the patient's brain, but he's injecting them directly with different medications and seeing the response with that. Why am I
hmm,
saying that? How is it different? Well, because if you inject that chemotherapy drug or whatever immune therapy drug in the vein intravenously, like chemotherapy, the way it's given, well, it does not saturate to a maximum level in the tumor. Why? Because there's something called the blood brain barrier. We have a blood brain barrier that God created, sort of, if you want to put it this way, to prevent any passage of bacteria or viruses into our brains or central nervous system. So, inadvertently, it blocks the passage of these drugs to cross and maximize to saturate the tumor. So they don't work very well. But if you inject it directly, you make sure that drug is being maximized and saturating the tumor bed.
hmm. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. My father had Parkinson's disease for many years, and I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Anthony Lang a
Uh-huh.
couple of years ago. He's at University of Toronto Hospital. Obviously, I think to be a neurologist, you kind of have to be brilliant. Period.
Yes.
You know, anyway, so here I am having this conversation with him and having a little bit of fun with him as well, just asking him kind of, you started X amount of years ago, Dr. Lang, as a student, fresh out of graduate school. Uh, that was then, this is now. What do you know about, the brain
Yeah.
today that, and what was really lovely and wonderful, here we are talking about, and what made me think of it was when you started talking about injecting the cells. I mean, he was talking about some of this science and technology where they're going to actually vaccinate, they hope,
Yes.
the Parkinson gene
Yes.
that you or I might carry. And I mean, isn't that's just
That's
incredible? And yet,
fascinating.
in the same breath, he said, you know what, I don't really know a whole lot more today than I did,
Yeah.
when I got out of school. In other words, the brain, pretty complicated piece of machinery. I don't even think I can call it machinery, but anyway, what can you tell me about that? What does Dr. Fine have to say to you about the complexity of the heart?
Oh,
What about the brain? Tell me about that.
well, he is still learning. Let me put it this
Yes,
way. He
yeah,
really is still learning.
I
He
bet.
always says that. And no matter, you scratch the tip of the iceberg, especially when it comes to central nervous system, diseases, be it the spinal cord or the brain. And there's so much interaction that is involved between the neurons and the glioma, the glial cells, and the neurosynapses and the neurotransmitters, that it's extremely hard to experiment on, like a heart, for example, or a kidney, or a GI system. But so far, I think they are making some strides, but
Mm.
they're still learning, and this is an area where I think we need a lot of help, especially funding wise, and from the private sector and government, because nobody can do it alone.
Do you think the heart's easy comparatively
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
brain?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at it look at it this way, David. I mean, just about, what is it, 25 years ago, anybody with a double coronary disease or triple, they bought themselves a ticket to the operating room with a bypass surgery. Well, how frequent do you hear that now? Almost none.
Mm.
All go into the cath lab and they do an angioplasty and a stent, and they're done. How many years ago? Years ago, aortic valve disease, a blocked valve, needed also open heart surgery and a valve replacement. Not anymore. We do now valve replacements through the groin, through a little incision in the groin and a catheter, what we call transcutaneous aortic valve replacement. So yes, it's more of a tangible diseases, the heart diseases that we can really see, first of all, tangible results right away, and we know a lot about it. But the brain is a totally different ballgame.
It's fascinating to me that I mean, you have a reason for, I suppose, a tragic reason, a family reason why you rolled your sleeves up and got involved. What do you say when you get this opportunity like you have today, I guess, on Face to Face here? But when you get in front of a microphone to tell that story, or you're being interviewed for a piece in an article, CNBC, whatever it might be, how do you motivate folks to not only give, but to say, this is worth talking about, this is worth writing a letter to your senator about, etc.?
Well, David, first of all, I think tragedies hits almost everybody in one way
Mm,
or the other, different degrees, different levels, and you have options to make. You have choices to make. One choice is to succumb to it and be depressed and be on antidepressants the rest of your life. And the other option is to get over the grieving process and get on with it and do something good. Make lemonade out of a lemon. Try to do something good and try to fight it this way. And that's the best way to fight it. That's the way I look at it. Um, you know, as far as the encouraging other people to do the same, I think there's so many people that either them in their own families or friends or distant relatives who have been struck by one disease or the other, and especially cancer.
hmm. It's
We
true.
we're still scratching really the tip of the iceberg in cancer, and because it's so diverse and it's so heterogeneous, and we ought to dedicate more funding towards it. And I think we can. I think we can.
It's interesting. I just, as you say, and I'm with you. I don't disagree at all. And I do, some of my work is in public engagement and, trying to get people to think about international development issues, for instance, social justice like issues in a new way, peel back those layers, get people asking questions that maybe they haven't asked before, and so on. And it's connected to the work that you and others are doing in the medical community, and certainly with diseases like cancer. What what do you say to those? And maybe you don't get this, and I hope you don't, but do you sense a level of indifference out there when it comes to this kind of work? Or maybe it's when it comes to funding this kind of work. I think I read in one of the articles when I was looking into this, Dr. Fine said something to the fact, the science is there. We're ready to go. It's
Yeah.
just we need more support. We need more people to come alongside us, whether that's corporate partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I guess I wasn't going to use the word naysayer, but there you go. I just did.
Yeah.
Are there naysayers out there
There
that
are.
say, you know what, we've tossed an awful lot of money against cancer and we're not much farther ahead? What gives
There
with
are,
that?
there are,
Yeah.
and unfortunate, but there are. And do I blame them? I don't know. Probably not, because as you said, they said, we've tossed so much money and billions of dollars towards cancer. But I say that Look what happened to prostate cancer. We tossed a
Mm,
lot of money towards prostate cancer, and nobody should die from prostate cancer anymore nowadays. Nobody, because we tossed a lot of money towards prostate
right.
cancer, meaning if it was early detected and there's effective treatment for it. The same thing for HIV/AIDS. Look what happened. We tossed a lot of money towards HIV/AIDS, and look what happened now. Nobody should really die from HIV/AIDS. We have made a huge difference, but that took a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, and a lot of funding. The same thing for breast cancer. These diseases were death sentences just about 25
Mm.
years ago. Not anymore. The same thing can be applied to brain cancer. Now, it may take time. It may not be in our generation, in our time, that we see as that substantial results, but it will happen if we stay committed and dedicated toward. And that's the way I would address these issues with people who say, well, we threw a lot of money towards it and nothing's happening. Yeah, but look at other things that we threw a lot of money at, and it is happening.
Well, and isn't that kind of what, as you were mentioning that, and I don't want to reduce the work that you've done or any scientist has done or any doctor or specialist, but in a way, you're reducing this massive, complicated, nuanced problem to something hopefully that's relatively simple that we can ultimately, at the end of the day, figure out. It's a problem to be solved.
Yep, exactly.
It's this, and it's obviously, with respect to brain cancer, it's incredibly complicated and as you mentioned, contextual by the brain, I guess, right?
Right,
by
right.
by the case.
Yep.
So yeah, I just was struck by this idea of scientists as problem solvers, period.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think we can do it, David. It takes it's a tedious effort. It's a long journey, but it needs commitment and dedication, and we can do it. There's nothing that the human brain cannot, no pun intended, can do if we put our mind to it.
Well, I mean, isn't that how you have to stay too when you're facing such a daunting task?
Yeah.
It seems to me you've got sleeves are rolled up. Maybe you're not smiling, but you're gritting your teeth and you're
Yeah.
saying, this smiling hopefully most of the time, but gritting your teeth, and this can be done. What about people what is it that you've learned from researchers that you've worked with now, the Dr. Fines of the world
Yeah.
who are taking something on that just does seem to be on a certain level insurmountable? That what I mean, you've talked a couple times. I love this: finance, dedication, commitment. That's great. I love that. Clearly, these are passionate, committed folk who are incredibly focused. Can
Yes.
can you can you talk a little bit more about that? I don't
Yeah.
know, that creative energy. That would they walk into a room and people notice it, or are they more sort of the reserve type? You know what
No,
I mean?
actually, it's amazing. A lot of them are reserved. A lot of these scientists are reserved. However, when they start speaking, you can see the fire in their guts.
Mm,
You can sense it. These are dedicated people. Now, a lot of them, like for example, Dr. Pardis, who spoke, he lost his sister to brain cancer. So he went through the whole experience. He knew what it is. Sadly, people who have experienced it themselves with family or relatives have, of course, more motivation than others to do something.
right. Makes
However,
sense.
yeah, but scientists who are very dedicated, and there are a lot of them out there. They have that stamina. It's amazing, and that dedication to go on no matter what. And they're relentless. And
Mm.
I absolutely raise my hat to them. They're wonderful human beings.
Yeah, relentless is probably a really good way to put it, and I mean I think that's certainly a lesson for all of us. It seems to me, and I love, as I said just a few minutes ago, this notion of dedication and commitment
Yeah,
and finance. And isn't that what the nonprofit sector really needs across the board when it comes to any issue, whether it's water and sanitation issues or
absolutely,
extreme poverty in the most remote parts of northeastern Cambodia.
absolutely.
It's dedication, commitment, and finance. Well, listen, Mason, we've got to wrap it up in a couple minutes here. We're coming to an end, and I'm certainly going to direct people towards the foundation's website. Any recent wins for you guys? Or challenges? Can you talk a little bit about that as
Well,
as we wrap this up? And by the way, folks, it's the Kamen it's KamenBrainTumorFoundation.org, and that's Kamen spelled Kamen. And of course, as usual, my listeners know there'll be links to the websites on the webpage and on the face-to-face page and so on. But yeah, just wondered if there was anything, any pending challenges or things you could celebrate with us here today.
Well, we're celebrating that we have really making major strides in finding a better and safer treatment options. Let's face it, finding a cure to brain cancer overnight is not a realistic is not a realistic option. But we can, step by step, we can find first better and safer treatment options. So a patient with brain cancer can live a good quality of life, and will make this disease a chronic illness like diabetes, like heart disease, on medications. And then from that point on, we can work for a cure. And that's really what my objective is. One step at a time, and we can do it. I ask the real listeners to go to our website, to look into what we're doing, and to try to, if they can help with whatever they can, that would be wonderful, because they will be helping a lot of children and their families.
So is that almost the soundbite for the interview, Mazen? Chronic illness to cure. Is that it?
Correct.
Yeah, that makes really great sense. I wish you well with it. It sounds like an incredible challenge. You are rolling the rock up the hill without a doubt, and it sounds like you've got some great partners along the way. And again, folks, it's Kamen Brain Tumor Foundation. .org. Check them out there. Thanks so much for your time today. We've been talking to Dr. Mazen Kamen, who's the president of the Kamen Brain Tumor Foundation. And as I said, find out more about them online. We've been chatting with him here today. Thanks so much for your time today, Mazen. I really do.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.